Welcome back to TrueNight Voices. Tonight everything might be quiet. Or not. Put on your headphones. Let's begin. You probably don't think much about gas stations. They're just a place to fill up, maybe grab a coffee, stretch your legs before another long stretch of road. But something happens when the sun goes down. The neon hum turns hollow. The fog rolls in heavier than before, and the quiet becomes unsettling. Most people pass through without noticing, but for just a few, that midnight stop becomes something else entirely. These are real stories from real people who stopped for gas and found something waiting for them. I invite you to turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and join me for 6 quiet stories that may just follow you into the dark. This is Midnight Encounters. He didn't need gas. He didn't buy snacks. He just stood there, watching me through the glass. I don't remember exactly when I started feeling uneasy every time a car pulled up to Pump 2 on Highway 58. Maybe it was after that one night. The one with the fog, the silence, and the man who came inside the station but didn't seem to need anything. My name's Cal, 29. I work night shifts at a gas station in Mount Line, a little pit stop tucked into the forested stretches outside Oak Ridge, Oregon. It's mostly truckers and road-weary backpackers who pass through, especially during the colder months. Our station isn't much. 2 old gas pumps, 1 humming fridge, a dusty coffee pot, and a tiny back room with a crooked painting of a swan turning green from mold. That night was thick with fog. Cold air seeped through the door seals. The yellow parking lights barely touched the mist. I'd brewed a fresh pot of coffee, put on some soft jazz, and was halfway through restocking the beef jerky rack when I heard the faint crunch of tires on gravel. A car SUV, old, boxy, rolled into Pump 2. I glanced up from behind the counter. The engine stayed on, headlights still shining. Nobody got out. That's not completely unusual. Some people dig around for their wallets or just need a break before hitting the mountain pass. I figured I'd give it a minute, maybe 2. But around 5 minutes later, the driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He moved slowly, deliberately, like this wasn't a rest stop but a planned stop. He was tall, maybe 6 foot, slender, wearing a green army jacket and a gray beanie. There was nothing about him that screamed threat, but there was something else. Something that felt rehearsed. When he walked in, the door chime let out a single strained ding. "Evening," I greeted. "Need help with anything?" He nodded once. "Don't need to buy anything. Just need the restroom." I pointed to the back. "Left of the fridge. It's open." He didn't say thanks, didn't even glance at the shelves like most people do. Just headed back with his hands in his pockets. Though, I noticed him glance once up at the ceiling camera. Weird detail, but I shrugged it off. Minutes passed. Longer than most people spend in there. I looked at the clock. 7 minutes. Eventually, he came out. I expected him to head back to his car, but instead, he stopped by the snack aisle and stared unblinking at a packet of salted peanuts like it held some secret truth. Then he turned toward me. "Pump 2's not working," he said, voice low and measured. I looked up at the monitor. Doesn't show any errors. No payment attempts. He paused. "It's not responding. Might be stuck or something. You mind coming out and checking?" That's when the air shifted. Nothing loud, no sudden horror, just a slow tightening in my chest. A tiny voice inside that said, "Don't. Did you try swiping your card already?" I asked. He nodded vaguely. "Yeah, said something. Not sure what. Could be jammed." I checked the system. There were no failed authorizations, No timeouts. No signs anyone had even touched the machine. I forced a polite smile. "Sorry, man. I'd come out, but overnight policy says I gotta stay inside unless it's an emergency. Can you try again and let me know exactly what it says?" He didn't argue. Didn't walk out, either. Just stood there for a moment longer than necessary, hands still deep in his coat pockets, watching me. That's when my gut fully turned, because this man wasn't confused. He wasn't frustrated. He was waiting. Finally, he gave a small nod, turned, and walked out. From behind the glass, I watched as he went straight to pump 2, picked up the nozzle, inserted it, and started pumping gas without any problem at all. He had never tried it before coming in. His entire reason for entering about the pump not working was a lie designed to get me to step outside. Why? That question kept circling. After he finished, he didn't drive away immediately. He sat in his car, engine running, headlights still on, staring directly through the glass at me for what felt like 3 straight minutes. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't lower his gaze. Through the fog and windshield glare, I could barely make out his face. But I felt him watching me. Not the way a lost traveler watches, not even the way someone stares in confusion. No, this was the gaze of someone waiting to see if I'd make a different choice. Eventually, he pulled out onto the highway and disappeared into the mist. I grabbed a sticky note, wrote down part of the plate number, and slid it beneath the register. Not because I expected to need it, just in case. An hour later, Officer Trent rolled through on his usual late-night patrol. I told him what happened about the bathroom break, the fake pump issue, the odd silence. He listened carefully, then let out a slow breath. "We had a similar report from another station last week," he said. "Same time, same story. Guy asks for help with the pump. Female clerk. Alone. Foggy night." I asked, "Did anything happen?" He paused. "Not yet, but something's off. All the reports match too closely to be coincidence. After that night, I switched to day shifts. I told my manager I'd rather haul crates of soda than sit alone while strangers watch me from behind a foggy windshield. He understood, but even now, every time I drive past Mountain Line Station on my way home, I glance at Pump 2. The lights still flicker. The pump still hums. And I still think about how close I came to stepping outside that night into the cold. Empty dark. I'll never know what he wanted, and I'm grateful for that. Sometimes it's not the monsters you see, it's the quiet ones. The ones who smile and ask if you need help with the gas. I don't know why this memory keeps coming back to me. It's not like something happened. Not exactly, but sometimes it's the things that almost happen, the ones you can't prove or name, that leave the deepest mark. It was early November when I made that solo drive from Lafayette, Louisiana up to Oxford, Mississippi. I had just broken up with someone I shouldn't have dated in the first place, and my mom had invited me home for the long weekend. Something about gumbo, reruns of Murder, She Wrote, and the promise of clean laundry felt grounding. The trip was 6 hours on paper, but I was tired, driving slow, stopping too often. I wasn't in a rush, just existing. I remember passing through a small town just off the Mississippi state line. It didn't have a name I recognized, just a stretch of cracked asphalt and hand-painted church signs. I had 1 bar of service, a low gas tank, and James Taylor murmuring through the speakers. The world was all pine trees and pale sky. The kind of place where sound seems to hang in the air longer than it should. That's when I saw the gas station. Just one pump, under a rusted green awning. The store behind it looked more like a shed, leaning slightly left, with its only window fogged by condensation and dead insects. The light above the pump flickered dimly, casting that sickly yellow glow you only see in forgotten towns. I pulled in anyway. I parked under the awning and stepped out. The ground was still damp from the morning's rain, and there was a thin mist hovering low like the breath of something sleeping. Inside the car, I could see my dog, my ZA, wiry little mix of terrier and who knows what, watching me from the passenger seat. I'd adopted her 2 years earlier after a breakup I swore would be my last impulsive decision. She always rode with me on these drives, head tilted, like she understood more than she should. I started fueling, watching the numbers climb slowly. It was quiet. No hum of highway. Just the soft clink of the pump and the occasional rustle of wind through wet leaves. Then I heard the car. It was old. Loud engine, gravel under tires. It pulled in slow, parking on the other side of the pump. A man stepped out, maybe late 50s, in a denim jacket and boots that looked too new for the rest of him. He didn't start fueling. He just stood there, watching me with a kind of cautious smile. The kind that wants to look polite, but doesn't quite reach the eyes. "You headed north?" he asked. His voice was low and gravelly, like he smoked more than he spoke. I nodded. "Oxford." "Pretty drive this time of year," he said, stepping a little closer. "Cold, though. You okay handling that nozzle on your own?" I smiled, out of habit. "I've managed so far." He gave a quiet chuckle, the kind that seems designed to sound fatherly. "Well, let me pump it for you. Least I can do. Fog's getting thick, don't want you fumbling in the dark." For a second, I hesitated, not out of fear, but from something softer, something guilty. Because a few years back, I'd snapped at a man in a parking lot who'd offered to carry my groceries. I thought he was being pushy. Later, I found out he was just someone's grandfather, a local widower who volunteered at the church pantry. I'd felt horrible. I didn't want to be that person again. The one who sees the worst in people. Still, my fingers tightened slightly on the handle. "No, thank you," I said. "I appreciate it, but I've got it." His eyes held mine for a moment longer than they needed to. Then he nodded. "Suit yourself," he said, and stepped back. I finished fueling and turned toward the store to pay. The inside lights were on, but no one was behind the register. I rang the bell. Nothing. Behind me, I heard the bell on the door jingle again. The man walked in, arms crossed loosely. "No one here?" he asked. "Doesn't look like it." "Maybe they leave it unlocked at night. Honor system. You pay what you owe." He smiled again, more with his teeth than his eyes. Maisie barked suddenly from outside. Just one sharp yip. I turned my head toward the window, and that's when I noticed something. His car. It wasn't at the pump anymore. It had been moved. Now it sat just outside the exit. Headlights off, nose angled toward the highway. I felt a prickle along the back of my neck. Not fear, exactly. Just clarity. That crisp, cold awareness that something isn't lining up. He hadn't fueled. He hadn't even looked at the pump, but his car was repositioned, like he was waiting for something or someone. Me. I took a step back toward the door. "I think I'll leave cash on the counter," I said quietly. The man didn't argue. He just watched as I slid a 20 beside the dusty register and walked out. Outside, the fog had thickened, curling around the edges of the pump like it was trying to listen. Maisie was growling now, low in her throat. I didn't look back. Back in the car, I locked the doors and started the engine. My heart wasn't racing, it was too still for that. It was the kind of quiet panic that sits in your spine. I pulled out slow, careful not to spin the tires. In the mirror, I saw the man still standing inside the store, watching me. He didn't move, didn't wave, just watched. It wasn't until I reached the highway that I realized the real twist. There had been no sign, no name, no price on the pump. When I glanced at the GPS, the station didn't show up. Just an empty plot. I kept driving until I hit Oxford, stopped at a real station. Bought a coffee and stood under the fluorescents for a long time, just breathing in the normalcy of brightly lit aisles and tinny jazz music. Later, I called my mom. Told her I'd be a little late. I didn't explain why. I've thought about that night more times than I can count, not because anything happened, but because I almost let it. Because some part of me, for one brief second, didn't want to be rude. I've learned since then that trust isn't free. It's earned, and slowly. And when you're alone in the fog, holding a gas nozzle in the dark, you don't owe anyone the benefit of the doubt. You owe yourself the right to be cautious, even if you never get to prove you were right. I moved to Blooming Rock, Tennessee at the beginning of last fall. If you've never heard of it, don't worry, most people haven't. It's one of those little towns, nestled between rolling hills and nothingness. No Walmart, no Uber, no real nightlife. Just a main street with a diner, a library that closes by 5, and a gas station that rents out DVDs like it's still 2006. I had just gotten out of grad school and was desperate for something quieter, simpler. After years of city noise and deadlines, Blooming Rock felt like a soft landing. I rented a tiny apartment above a used bookstore and told myself this would be temporary, just a year. A year to breathe. And for the most part, it worked, until that night. It was a Sunday, late November. I'd spent the weekend in Knoxville visiting my cousin and her new baby. The drive back was long and quiet, winding through the darker parts of Highway 33, where radio stations cut in and out, and even the stars feel farther away. Maisie, my dog, a sleepy beagle with more personality than most people I know, was curled up in the passenger seat, snoring gently. The heater hummed low. The kind of night where the world feels like it's been wrapped in wool, muffled, soft, and just a little eerie. I pulled into the Tandem Market around 9:45 p.m. It's the only gas station within walking distance of my place. Bright yellow signage, old brick facade, and that one buzzing overhead light that made everything look like it was underwater. I parked by Pump 2, stepped out, and stretched my legs. It was colder than I expected. Fog had begun to creep in from the fields beyond the station, clinging low to the asphalt. I shivered and clicked the pump into place. That's when I saw him. He came in on one of those recumbent bikes, the kind where you sit back like you're riding a lawn chair. I noticed him first because of the soft metallic clinking of the chain as he coasted in, legs pedaling slow. He wore a dark windbreaker, hood up, and a large backpack strapped behind him. The kind of man you can't quite place an age on, somewhere between 35 and 55, but his posture was tired. I assumed he was just stopping for snacks or a drink. A lot of locals did. Tandem was the unofficial convenience hub of Blooming Rock. He parked his bike by the newspaper rack outside the door, looked at me once, a sharp, unblinking look, then went inside. I brushed it off. Maisie barked once, a soft boof that she sometimes makes when she senses movement. "Just a guy, girl," I murmured. The pump clicked. Finished. I put the nozzle back and stepped inside to get change. As I pulled the door open, I almost bumped into him. He was standing near the entrance, staring at the drink cooler but not reaching for anything. "Excuse me," I said politely. He didn't move. Just shifted slightly, eyes flicking to me and back again. I moved around him, heart picking up just a bit. I got my change from the clerk, an older woman named Tina who always wore knit vests and read crime thrillers behind the counter. "Cold night," I said, just to say something. She nodded. "And quiet. You're my first customer in over an hour." I glanced back. The man was still browsing, still hadn't picked anything up. Outside, the fog had thickened. I walked quickly to my car. As I reached for the handle, I glanced behind me. He was at the window, watching me, just standing there, silhouetted in the golden light of the store, head slightly tilted. Like a question he never planned to ask out loud. I got into the car, locked the doors out of habit. Maisie was wide awake now, ears perked. I started the engine, but didn't drive off right away. Because the man didn't leave. He lingered inside, pretending to look at newspapers now. But something about the way he stood, the stillness of it, it didn't feel like browsing. It felt like waiting. I sat there for 5 minutes, maybe more. And then just as I started to pull away, the door opened. He walked out. He didn't look at me, just picked up his bike slowly, then stood next to it, not riding, not leaving, just standing. I turned onto Maple Lane and headed for home. It was barely a 3-minute drive. When I reached my building, I hesitated. The street was dark, lined with old oak trees and single-porch homes. My parking spot was directly under a lamppost, but somehow that only made the surrounding shadows seem darker. That's when a thought struck me. He saw which direction I went. In a town this small, with a car like mine, a red Civic with out-of-state plates and a cracked bumper, it wouldn't take much to find me. A slow rider, a quiet street. A few minutes of looking, I didn't park. Instead, I circled the block. Twice. On the second loop, I saw him, 2 blocks east, biking slow. His hood was still up, his posture unchanged. I didn't know if he'd seen me, but I didn't wait to find out. I drove across town and pulled into the Blooming Rock Sheriff substation. It was closed, lights off, but their lot was well lit. I parked near the front and just sat there. Maisie leaned against me, trembling slightly. Or maybe that was me. After 10 minutes, I saw headlights. A cruiser pulled in. A deputy stepped out, tall, late 20s, badge shining under the floodlight. He tapped on my window. I rolled it down, explaining quickly what had happened. He listened, face unreadable. "Did he threaten you?" he asked. "No, he didn't even speak to me." "Follow you?" "Not exactly, but I think he might have been trying." The officer nodded. "We've had a few complaints. Same description. Guy on a low bike, rides around town late at night. Doesn't do much, just shows up." He sighed, like someone carrying a long, invisible weight. "I'll take a drive down that way. You heading home?" I hesitated. Eventually, he gave me a card. "If you see him again, call, even if it's nothing." I nodded. That night, I parked behind my building and carried Maisie up the stairs. She didn't fight it. She was still warm, soft against my chest. I didn't sleep much. Every creak of the building made me flinch. Every flash of headlights through the blinds tightened my stomach. Days passed. Nothing happened. I told myself it was just nerves. Just small-town paranoia. Then, 1 week later, I saw him again. Midday, broad daylight. He was sitting on the same bike, outside the library, staring at the brick wall. Not reading, not talking, just there. When I walked by, he didn't move, didn't smile, didn't blink. I went inside, heart pounding. By the time I came out, he was gone. I've lived in Blooming Rock for 8 months now, and I still see him. Sometimes near the gas station, sometimes at the park. Always quiet, always watching. Never doing anything wrong, but always just there. I've thought about moving. I've thought about confronting him. I've thought about a lot of things, but mostly, I think about how nothing really happened that night. Nothing I could prove, nothing I could report. And yet, I've never felt quite safe since. Sometimes, you don't realize a moment was dangerous until long after it's passed. This story didn't end with anyone screaming, "No blood, no missing persons report." But to this day, I still think about how easily things could have turned out differently if we'd trusted too quickly, or stayed a few minutes longer. It was the summer of 2019. My friend Leo and I were on a road trip down the Oregon coast. We were both 2 years out of college, broke, overworked, and clinging to whatever scraps of youth we had left. We rented a little gray hatchback we named Hazel, and we mapped out a week of stops: Crater Lake, Florence, Coos Bay, Cannon Beach. Just the two of us, a Spotify playlist called Fog and Folk, and a backpack full of instant noodles. Leo was the planner type A, bullet journal type, while I was just trying not to burn out. He wanted photos of cliffs and lighthouses. I just wanted to breathe air that hadn't been processed through an HVAC system. That day, we'd spent hours hiking in Ecola State Park and watching surfers bob like seals in the cold, gray waves. By the time we left Cannon Beach, the sun had just dipped below the pines, and mist was starting to curl across the road like spilled milk. "I say we drive inland and find somewhere cheaper to sleep," Leo said, chewing a granola bar as he adjusted the air vents. "The motels here are all $300 a night." "Cheaper sounds good," I yawned. "Hazel needs gas anyway." We followed the GPS away from the coastline down winding forest roads. No streetlights, just high beams slicing through fog and trees that looked older than anything we'd ever known. Then the gaslight blinked on. "There's a station 5 miles ahead," Leo said, squinting at his phone. "Called Pioneer Fuel. Weird it's not even on the map app, just listed on Google reviews." "Any good reviews?" he snorted. "One says cheap gas, sketchy guy in camo pants, 5 stars. So, promising." I laughed nervously. About 10 minutes later, we spotted the glow. A single gas station crouched in the bend of the road like a sleeping animal. 2 rusted pumps, 1 flickering floodlight, and a narrow building that looked more like a tool shed than a convenience store. No other cars, no music, just that strange, golden silence that seems to stretch too long between breaths. We pulled in. I stayed in the car while Leo stepped out to pay at the pump. The card reader looked ancient. He came back shaking his head. "Won't take my card. Want to check inside?" I didn't want to. Something about the place felt paused, like we'd interrupted it, but we were low on gas, far from town, and the next station was another 20 miles according to the GPS. "Okay," I sighed. 2 minutes. The store smelled like cedar and dust. The floor was concrete, walls lined with old snack racks and a cooler humming too loud. Behind the counter stood a man in a navy flannel shirt, middle-aged, tall, graying beard. He looked up as we entered and smiled, but his expression didn't quite reach his eyes. "Need gas?" he asked. Leo nodded. "Yeah, the pump wouldn't take my card." "Ah, yeah, she's temperamental," the man chuckled. "Only takes cash this time of night." "You folks headed out east?" "Eventually," I said carefully. "Well, you're lucky. Lot of weirdos in these woods." He said it so casually, like he was talking about the weather. He gave us change for a 20 and told Leo to give the pump a little slap before it'd start working. Then, just as we were about to leave, he pulled a small business card from under the counter. "If you run into trouble," he said, "give me a ring. Name's Dale Barlow. I do towing and small repairs too. Cells on the back." Leo took it, thanked him. Outside, the fog had thickened. I could barely see the edge of the road. Leo slapped the pump like Dale said, and this time, it worked. As we waited, I sat in the car, letting my nerves unwind. Dale might have been weird, but we were fine. That's when another vehicle pulled in. A white van. No logos. No windows in the back. It coasted in slow, tires whispering over wet gravel, and stopped at the far end of the lot. The engine didn't turn off. No one got out. Leo hadn't noticed. He was watching the numbers on the pump. I leaned forward, squinting. The van didn't move. No lights inside. Just idle. Waiting. A minute later, the gas was done. Leo returned to the car, receipt in hand. "Okay, full tank and $20 poorer. Let's get out of here." I didn't say anything until we were already back on the road. "That van," I said. "Back at the station. It never moved." Leo frowned. "I didn't see one. It was just sitting there. No one came out. No one pumped anything." He was quiet for a moment. Then, weird. About 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Leo's phone number calling me. I turned to him. He was driving. He didn't even have his phone out. We both stared at the screen. The call ended after one ring. Leo pulled over. We checked his call log. Nothing there. No missed calls. No dialed numbers. Just silence. The next morning, over breakfast at a dusty diner in Corvallis, Leo pulled out the business card Dale had given him. "Check this out," he said, flipping it over. The front said, "Dale Barlow, towing, fuel, repairs, 24/7, rescue." But the back was blank. Completely blank. No number, no ink, no imprint. Just plain cardstock. I reached for my phone and Googled his name. What came up first wasn't a mechanic. It was an article. "Man falsely accused in Oregon murder case files civil lawsuit. The man's face was in the Preet Elvery." Thumbnail. It was Dale. Same eyes. Same beard. The article said he'd been identified by a survivor in the late 1990s as a suspect in a string of disappearances. The real perpetrator was eventually caught through DNA. But during the investigation, Dale had been arrested, questioned, and later released without charges. His name had never been cleared publicly, and yet, there he was, running a gas station in the woods, handing us a number that didn't exist. We never talked about it much after that, but sometimes I dream about that white van, about the gas station that didn't show up on Apple Maps, about the business card that gave me no way to call for help, about how easy it is to disappear when the road is quiet, the fog is thick, and no one's expecting you to come back. It was 2 days before Christmas when I found myself on a stretch of I-64 somewhere between Huntington, West Virginia and the mountains of western Maryland. I was headed home to spend the holidays with my parents, making the long 10-hour drive from Nashville. I had done the trip before, but never this late, and never alone except for Bowie, my dog. He's a mutt-part husky, part shepherd, part who knows what rescued when he was just skin and ribs and soft eyes that said, "Don't leave me here." Now, 3 years later, he was stretched out across the back seat, head resting on a wrapped box that jingled every time the car hit a bump. My mom had always said Christmas wasn't about the gifts, but I knew she'd be disappointed if I didn't bring that stupid ceramic angel she'd been hinting at for months. The highway was quiet. Most folks had already made it home, tucked in with cocoa and string lights and distant relatives. The world felt paused, like it was taking a breath before the holiday storm. But I was running on fumes both emotionally and literally. Around 10:20 p.m., I spotted the blue and white sign of a Sun Valley fuel stop just off exit 191. I hadn't passed another station in 40 miles. It sat at the edge of a wide gravel lot, half lit by crooked LED panels, the kind that flickered just enough to make everything feel a little off. The store was still open. A faded hot pizza slices sign buzzed in the window, more hopeful than honest. Behind it, rows of metal shelves, candy, and a lone clerk sat slouched behind bulletproof glass. I pulled up to pump 3. Cold air greeted me like a slap. I zipped up my pea coat, a dark wool number my mom had given me when I finished grad school. She called it grown-up armor. I'd never say it out loud, but I wore it for her more than for the warmth. As the gas pump rattled to life, Bowie stirred and pressed his nose to the back window. That's when I noticed the man. He wasn't there when I pulled in. He stood a few feet from my car now, just inside the shadows between pumps 4 and 5. Thin, mid-40s maybe. Beard like steel wool and a hoodie that sagged off his shoulders. He wasn't pumping gas, just standing. He saw me looking and walked closer. "Hey man," he said, voice crackling like gravel. "You got any extra clothes? Anything to help me out tonight? It's cold as hell out here." My first instinct was to say yes. I'd grown up being told not to turn people away empty-handed, especially not near Christmas. But all I had were wrapped gifts and my own suitcase jeans, socks, a few sweaters. Nothing extra. "I'm sorry, man," I said, offering a sympathetic shrug. "Everything in the back is packed for the trip." His eyes flicked toward the boxes. "Even something small would help," he said. "That red bag looks like it's full." I felt something shift in my chest. The way he spoke, not desperate, not pleading but expectant. Like he wasn't asking anymore. "I've got some food inside," I said, trying to pivot. "Didn't eat half of it. You want?" He cut me off. "Nah," he said flatly. "I don't need food." Then he looked at my coat. "That's a nice coat. Heavy. You could give me that." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. I blinked. "This coat?" He nodded. "You're heading home, right? To family? Warm bed? You won't miss it." "Me? I've been sleeping outside." That coat would change my whole night. He took a step closer. Behind me, I heard Bowie's low growl begin to stir. I backed up half a step, trying to sound calm. "I get it, man. Really. But this was a gift, and it's the only warm thing I've got with me." His expression hardened. The cold politeness dropped. "So, that's it?" he said. "You're just gonna leave me to freeze?" There it was, the shift. It always comes, that quiet moment where kindness ends and something else begins. I've seen it before in shelters, in bars, in my own reflection on bad days. That tipping point. I glanced toward the store. The clerk was on the phone laughing. No help there. The man stepped closer. Not fast, not aggressive, just closer. Now only a few feet away. "You're wearing your life like a badge," he muttered. "Parents give you everything, and you can't even give back." That's when Bowie barked. Not a friendly bark, a full-throated snarl, sharp and guttural. He lunged against the window, paws slamming the glass. The man turned sharply toward the sound. "Get your mutt to shut up!" I didn't respond, because now I saw Idith's left hand buried deep in his jacket pocket, fingers moving slightly, like fidgeting with something hidden. I stepped back, my voice steady. "You need to leave," I said, "right now." He didn't, not until Bowie barked again, louder this time, teeth flashing behind the glass like he meant it. "I open this door," I said, "and he will tear your throat out." "You want to risk that?" For the first time, he hesitated, and that hesitation was enough. He stepped back, then turned, not to walk away but to cross the lot, toward a black SUV parked at the far end. Its engine was running. No lights on. I hadn't noticed it before. The man climbed into the passenger seat. A few seconds later, it pulled out of the lot, slow and silent. Gone. I got into the car, hands shaking. Bowie immediately climbed into the front, still staring out the windshield. I locked the doors, sat there for a minute, then two. Then I drove. Not home. Not yet. I drove 10 miles out of my way to a 24-hour diner, ordered coffee I didn't want, and sat in the booth by the window, watching headlights pass like ghosts. I stayed there for over an hour, because something about the man didn't sit right. Not the request, not the words, but the way he had arrived and how he left. He hadn't been looking for help. He'd been waiting. I never told my parents about it. I didn't want to dampen Christmas, but when I unpacked that night, I found a note wedged in my coat pocket. Something I hadn't remembered placing there. It was from my mom, tucked in before I left Nashville. It said, "Whatever road takes you home, don't forget who you are. You are not here to save everyone, but you can always choose yourself, too." And that night, I did, just in time. I started working nights at the Riverside Mart not long after moving back to my hometown, Elkridge, Pennsylvania. Just one of those temporary things, or at least that's what I told myself. After finishing my degree, job prospects were slow, and the gas station was 5 minutes from my mom's house and always hiring. The station sat at the edge of town near the highway ramp with 4 pumps, a tiny snack aisle, and fluorescent lights that buzzed like they were tired of staying awake. The graveyard shift was quiet, mostly. A few regulars, some truckers, the occasional local stopping for coffee or scratch-offs. It was the kind of job that made you forget time. The hum of the cooler, the flickering of the exterior light above pump 1, the mechanical chime of the door opening and closing, like a metronome counting down the hours between midnight and dawn. Most nights passed without much happening, but not this one. It started a little after 11 p.m. A man walked in, probably late 40s, wore a hooded jacket and jeans. He had this unfortunate haircut, uneven, blunt, like someone had put a bowl over his head and just started snipping. He approached the counter slowly, like someone pretending not to be in a rush but clearly thinking ahead. "Hey," he said, "can you break 100? I looked at him, then at the register. "Sorry," I said. "Store policy. We don't take 50s or 100s after 10 p.m. I don't have the change for that anyway." He frowned. "What if I just buy something small?" "Still no. It's not about the purchase. We just don't accept big bills late at night." He didn't argue, just stepped to the side, letting out a sigh as an older woman came in behind him. She smiled, asked politely if I could hold her tote while she used the restroom. "Of course," I said, stepping back to place it behind the counter. When I looked up, he was on his phone. A minute later, another man walked in. You ever feel it immediately that someone's off before they even speak? He had that energy. Twitchy. Skin pale and patchy, picking at something under his chin. He bounced on the balls of his feet, like he couldn't decide if he wanted to shop or spar. He wandered up to the counter, hands in his hoodie pockets. "Hey, sweetheart," he said. "You always work here alone?" I blinked. "Depends on the night." He smiled. You got a panic button or something behind the counter? I didn't answer. Then he asked, You carry anything? Pepper spray, taser, gun? My hand instinctively tightened on the counter. He leaned in a little. I always carry. You never know who you'll run into, right? There was something playful in his tone, but it was the kind of play you don't want to join. My throat felt tight, but my voice didn't shake. We're not allowed to carry weapons here, I said. Company policy, he nodded, pretending to think. How much cash you keep in that drawer overnight? That's when I snapped. I've been told I'm a little too blunt sometimes, but there's a point where being polite becomes being unsafe. So I looked him straight in the eye and said, Look, are you planning to rob me? Because if you are, you're wasting time. His expression changed instantly, hands raised like I'd pulled a weapon. Whoa, he said. What the hell? I was just making conversation. Well, I said, your conversation needs serious work. You don't ask a woman alone at night about money, weapons, or panic buttons. His eyes narrowed. I'm just being friendly. Then be friendly somewhere else, I said. You've got 30 seconds to leave before I call the cops. I meant it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't back down. The guy looked at me for a long second, then turned and walked out slow and muttering. But here's the part that stuck with me. The guy with the bowl cut? He'd pulled their car, a gray sedan, horizontally across the front of the store, blocking the exit, not parked in a space, not angled for pumping gas, just horizontal, facing the door, like they were waiting. For what? The older woman came out of the restroom just then, eyebrows raised. Everything okay, honey? I nodded, putting on a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Just a guy asking weird questions. She squinted out the window. I saw the car. Strange way to park. She leaned in slightly. You want me to stay a minute? I've got nowhere to be. I wanted to say no, but I didn't. Instead, I just said, yeah, maybe just for a minute. They didn't come back that night, but a few days later, I was stocking drinks in the back cooler when I heard yelling at the front. Same guy, the twitchy one. He was arguing with my manager, red-faced and flailing. You banned me for talking. That's all I did. My manager, calm as ever, just shook his head. I listened to the security audio, he said, and I would have done exactly what she did. The guy left after that. I never saw him again, but I still think about how easy it would have been for things to go the other way. If I'd hesitated, if I'd stepped outside, if I'd let that car stay blocking the door just a little longer. Sometimes survival isn't about escaping danger. It's about recognizing when you're almost in it and shutting it down before it even begins. You never really expect anything strange to happen at a gas station. It's supposed to be a quick stop, something between here and wherever you're going. But late at night, under flickering lights far from the city, there are moments when time slows and something else steps in. Sometimes it's just a feeling. Other times, it's something that stares back at you from the shadows. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying with me. I hope tonight's stories linger just long enough to keep you glancing over your shoulder. Until next time, stay aware, stay warm, and stay in the light. This has been True Night Voices.